in a secluded cabin nestled on the precipice of the majestic Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. A beacon of compassion named Dr. Elaine Foster, a dedicated wildlife rehabilitator, had cultivated a family that defied conventional understanding. For 15 long years, her heart had poured into rescuing injured animals, nurturing them back to health, and releasing them into their rightful wild domains. But 6 years prior, during a violent spring thunderstorm, fate had delivered a creature unlike any other into her care. Orion, a breathtaking bobcat, with fur the color of sun-baked earth, strikingly tipped black ears, and eyes that gleamed with an uncanny amber intelligence. He was a mere wisp of spotted fur, a tiny trembling orphan, abandoned in the hollow of an ancient log, his umbilical cord still clinging to him, a testament to his tender age. The mother vanished, perhaps fallen victim to cruel hunters, or perhaps in the harsh reality of the wild, simply abandoning the frail runt of her litter. Whatever the tragic reason, Orion was alone, utterly vulnerable, and Elaine's compassionate heart had compelled her to intervene. You should have seen him back then. Elaine would often recount to visitors who stood in stunned admiration of the now robust 30-pound feline, who often graced her window seat with regal repose. He fit right in the palm of my hand and needed to be bottle-fed every 2 agonizing hours. Her loyal companion, Cooper, an aging golden retriever with a heart as golden as his fur, had instantly appointed himself Orion's protector. With gentle nudges and licks, he'd clean the tiny kitten's fuzzy face after every meal, offering the warmth of his body as a comforting cradle during naps. Now 12 years etched in the silver of his muzzle, Cooper still treated Orion with the same tender patience, even as their roles had subtly shifted, a silent testament to their extraordinary bond. When the somber-faced wildlife officials finally arrived to assess Orion's progress, their pronouncement shattered Elaine's secret hopes. The magnificent bobcat, they declared with unyielding authority, had imprinted too deeply on humans. The innate wildness, the essential wariness required for survival in the untamed forests, would forever elude him. A wave of relief, unexpected yet profound, washed over Elaine. By then, Orion had woven himself into the very fabric of her life, a creature so exceptional, so far beyond ordinary classification, that the thought of releasing him felt like tearing a piece of her own heart away. Elaine's neighbor, Frank Wilson, a retired biology professor, whose eyes held the knowing squint of a lifetime spent observing the natural world, and whose mind was a vast encyclopedia of North American wildlife, had witnessed Orion's unique character firsthand. One quiet evening, he'd observed with jaw-dropping astonishment as Orion meticulously arranged a set of wooden blocks, stacking them in perfect ascending order. I've dedicated 40 years to studying wild cats. He'd murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. And I have never, ever witnessed anything remotely like this. This isn't mere learned behavior, Elaine. He's problem-solving. That level of cognitive ability is incredibly rare, even in the most intelligent domesticated animals. It was Frank, in a moment of bewildered wonder, who jokingly suggested that Orion's IQ must hover around an astounding 200. A whimsical quip that took root and blossomed as Orion continued to unveil abilities that seemed to defy the very boundaries of the animal kingdom. One crisp autumn morning, the air in the cabin held a hint of wood smoke and the promise of a golden day. Elaine sat at her weathered kitchen table, cradling a steaming mug of coffee, her brow furrowed in concentration as she reviewed a stack of patient files. Her part-time work as a veterinarian at the local wildlife center demanded a mountain of paperwork before the clock struck noon. In the corner, nestled in his plush bed, Cooper snored softly, the occasional dream whimper escaping his graying muzzle. A sudden chill permeated the cabin. The overnight temperatures had plummeted into the low 40s. Elaine had intended to ignite the warmth of the furnace, but had forgotten in her frantic rush the previous evening to attend to an injured barred owl, its delicate wing tragically broken. Across the room, on his custom-built perch near the high ceiling, a series of artfully placed shelves designed to cater to his agile nature. Orion surveyed his domain with regal composure. His sensitive ears twitched forward, capturing Elaine's almost imperceptible shiver. With a fluid grace that spoke of both wild instinct and domestic adaptation, he stretched languidly, descended the platforms with silent precision, and padded across the cool hardwood floor. Elaine, lost in the labyrinth of her files, remained oblivious to his approach toward the thermostat, mounted on the wall. With meticulous care, Orion rose onto his powerful hind legs, extended a paw with surprising dexterity, and pressed the up arrow button 3 deliberate times. A low hum vibrated through the cabin as the heating system sprang to life, chasing away the lingering cold. "Well, thank you." Elaine chuckled, finally lifting her gaze as a wave of warmth enveloped her. "I was just about to do that myself." Orion blinked slowly, a feline gesture that Elaine had come to recognize as his gentle smile, before sauntering to the kitchen counter. There, he nudged his empty water bowl with a deliberate force, creating a clear, resonant ping against the ceramic backsplash. All right, I hear you." Elaine responded, rising to fill his bowl with fresh, filtered water. These quiet morning rituals had become so deeply ingrained in their lives that Elaine sometimes lost sight of their extraordinary nature. It wasn't until her sister Jennifer arrived from the bustling city of Chicago, accompanied by her energetic 8-year-old twins, Max and Maya, that the sheer uniqueness of Elaine's household dynamics was thrown into sharp relief. "Aunt Elaine, is it true you have a real Bobcat?" Max exclaimed, tumbling out of the car before Jennifer had even fully engaged the parking brake. His eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "A wild Bobcat," his sister Maya corrected with an air of superior knowledge. "Mom says he's super smart, like smarter than some people." Jennifer shot Elaine an apologetic glance as she wrestled their luggage from the trunk. "I may have hyped up your unusual pet situation a bit too much. They haven't talked about anything else for weeks. He's not exactly a pet." Elaine explained, gently shepherding the wide-eyed children onto the porch. "Orion is a wild animal who happens to live with me because he can't survive in the forest on his own. We have a special arrangement." "Where is he?" Maya asked, her face pressed eagerly against the screen door, her curiosity palpable. "Probably watching us right now," Elaine said with a warm smile. "He's quite curious about visitors, but he prefers to observe from a distance first." Cooper, ever the gracious host, greeted them with enthusiastic tail wags that swept across the porch, showering the children with affection. Jennifer, however, hung back her eyes, darting nervously around the cabin, a flicker of apprehension in their depths. "Relax," Elaine reassured her, her voice calm and steady. "Orion has never shown the slightest hint of aggression toward humans. He's cautious around strangers, but he's incredibly gentle, especially with children. Just let him come to you on his own terms." Their first glimpse of the elusive Orion came during lunch. A tawny shadow, silent as the falling leaves of autumn, slipped through the doorway of Elaine's study. The magnificent Bobcat froze momentarily, his piercing amber eyes widening with a flicker of intense interest as he took in the unfamiliar humans gathered around the dining table. "Oh my gosh," Maya whispered, her small hand clutching her sandwich with white-knuckled intensity. "He's beautiful." "Stay still," Elaine advised quietly, her voice a soothing balm. Let him decide what happens next. What transpired in the following moments left even Elaine, who had witnessed Orion's extraordinary nature countless times, utterly speechless. With measured, deliberate steps, Orion approached the table, his unwavering gaze fixed on Max, who was struggling with a small, stubbornly sealed bag of potato chips. The Bobcat sat down beside the boy's chair, reached up with one exquisitely coordinated paw, and delicately took the corner of the bag between his teeth. With a swift, controlled motion that spoke of both precision and understanding, he tore the top open, then gracefully backed away, settling onto his haunches, his intelligent eyes watching Max with an almost expectant air. Did he just open that for me? Max stammered, his voice hushed with awe. He did. Elaine confirmed, a wave of proud affection swelling in her chest, a smile she couldn't suppress gracing her lips. He's incredibly observant. He saw you struggling and decided to help. That's insane. Jennifer murmured, her earlier apprehension melting away, replaced by a burgeoning fascination. That's just the beginning. Elaine replied, a hint of playful mystery in her tone. Throughout the afternoon, Orion orchestrated an escalating series of astonishing feats that sent the twins into peals of delighted laughter and kept Jennifer's phone perpetually in her hand, capturing videos that she knew her friends back home would struggle to believe. When Maya accidentally dropped her favorite colored pencil under the sofa while engrossed in her drawing, Orion not only retrieved it with effortless grace, but returned with the exact same shade from a spare set neatly arranged on Elaine's desk. While Max was constructing a precarious tower of wooden blocks, Orion watched with intense concentration before gently nudging a slightly misaligned block with his nose, preventing what would have been an inevitable gravity-induced collapse. But it was the events of the evening that truly illuminated the breathtaking scope of Orion's extraordinary intelligence. The autumn sunset painted the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, casting long, dancing shadows through the cabin windows as Elaine prepared dinner. Cooper had settled into his usual spot near the kitchen, his hopeful gaze fixed on Elaine's hands, anticipating any stray morsels. The children were busily setting the table, while Jennifer diligently chopped vegetables for a vibrant salad. It's getting dark in here, Maya observed, squinting at the silverware in her small hands. Before Elaine could respond, Orion executed a graceful leap onto a nearby side table where a touch-sensitive lamp stood. With deliberate precision, he tapped his paw against the metal base 3 times until the warm light flooded the area. He then proceeded to repeat the same action with 2 other lamps strategically placed in the living area, bathing the room in a cozy glow. Did he just turn on the lights? Jennifer asked, the knife frozen mid-chop in her hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. He prefers good lighting, Elaine explained casually, as if discussing a roommate's quirky preference rather than the astonishing behavior of a wild animal. He gets a bit irritable if he can't see clearly after sunset. Later, as they enjoyed their meal, a sudden fierce gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a shiver of coolness through the room. Orion's sensitive ears twitched at the sound. He padded silently to a wooden chest tucked in a corner, nudged the lid open with his nose, and carefully extracted a folded throw blanket with his teeth. Dragging it across the floor with surprising gentleness, he deposited it at Maya's feet, who had instinctively hugged herself against the momentary chill. He noticed you were cold. Elaine explained, a warm smile gracing her lips as Maya gratefully draped the soft blanket over her shoulders. But how does he know what a blanket is for? Max asked, his fork suspended in midair, his young mind struggling to comprehend the implications of Orion's actions. He observes, Elaine said simply, her voice filled with quiet wonder. He makes connections. After dinner, as they gathered in the cozy living room for a lively game of board games, Orion's behavior took on an even more remarkable dimension. He positioned himself strategically between Cooper and the children, occasionally offering his sturdy body as a backrest for the aging dog who seemed to relish the comforting support. When Cooper's favorite well-worn chew toy rolled under a low cabinet, Orion immediately retrieved it without any prompting, placing it gently back in the old dog's reach. They're like best friends, Maya observed, watching the unlikely pair with wide-eyed fascination. They have an understanding. Elaine agreed softly, her gaze filled with affection. Cooper was there for Orion when he was at his most vulnerable. And now Orion returns the favor in his own unique way. The true breathtaking extent of Orion's capabilities unfurled the following morning. Jennifer awoke to a profound silence within the cabin. Assuming everyone was still lost in the embrace of sleep, she crept quietly to the kitchen, her senses craving the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. There on the counter, a note from Elaine explained her sudden early departure. Had to rush out. Injured eagle brought in at dawn. Help yourself to breakfast. Back by noon. Don't worry about Orion and Cooper. They have a morning routine. Jennifer poured herself a steaming mug and wandered to the window where an astonishing scene unfolded before her eyes in the misty backyard. Orion was gently guiding Cooper down the slight incline toward the small tranquil pond. The old dog moved with a stiff, labored gait, his arthritic joints clearly protesting the morning chill. With remarkable patience and unwavering attentiveness, the magnificent Bobcat walked steadily beside Cooper, occasionally pressing his sturdy body against the dog's side whenever Cooper appeared unsteady. At the pond's edge, Cooper lowered himself painfully to drink, and Orion waited a silent guardian, vigilant and protective, before leading the slow journey back to the house at Cooper's pace. Jennifer, her coffee forgotten in her hand, opened the door for them, her voice a hushed murmur filled with emotion. You take care of him, don't you?" she whispered to Orion, who acknowledged her with a slow, deliberate blink, before gently guiding Cooper back to his familiar bed. What happened next left Jennifer fumbling for her phone, her fingers trembling with disbelief. Orion approached a low wooden cabinet, hooked his sharp claws around the handle with surprising dexterity, and pulled it open. Inside, neatly arranged in labeled containers, were various medications and supplements. With an almost knowing precision, the Bobcat selected a specific container marked Cooper, Joint Tabs, and nudged it open with his nose, and carefully carried a single chewable tablet to Cooper's bedside. The old dog accepted the offering with gentle grace from Orion's mouth, chewing it with evident appreciation, before settling back with a contented sigh. Orion then returned to the cabinet, closed it with a soft thud of his shoulder, and proceeded to his own water bowl, which he then deliberately pushed toward Cooper using his forehead. When the twins finally emerged, their hair tousled and their eyes still heavy with sleep, Jennifer recounted the extraordinary scene she had witnessed, her voice filled with the breathless wonder of someone who had glimpsed something truly miraculous. "Aunt Elaine said Orion is super smart," Max exclaimed, his eyes wide with awe. "But that's like superhero smart." "It's more than intelligence, Max," Jennifer replied thoughtfully, her gaze fixed on the remarkable Bobcat who now lay peacefully beside his aging companion. "It's compassion." Throughout their week-long visit, Orion continued to astound them with demonstrations of his extraordinary mind. He learned the children's daily routines with an unnerving speed, appearing with Maya's hairbrush each morning before she even voiced her need. He seemed to anticipate Max's frequent requests for juice, positioning himself expectantly by the refrigerator door whenever the boy showed the slightest sign of thirst. He successfully opened latched windows when the cabin grew stuffy, operated the remote control for the ceiling fan by pressing specific buttons with his paw, and once memorably unplugged Jennifer's phone charger when it began emitting the subtle buzzing sound that signals a faulty connection. But perhaps the most profound testament to Orion's unique nature was his apparent understanding of human emotions. One quiet evening, when homesickness washed over Maya, dissolving her into silent tears after a phone call with her father, Orion approached her with something clutched gently in his teeth, a framed family photograph he had somehow retrieved from their luggage. He placed it carefully beside her, then pressed his warm, comforting body against her side until her sobs subsided. "How does he know?" Maya whispered to Elaine later, her voice still thick with emotion. "It's like he can read my mind." "Not your mind, sweetie," Elaine corrected gently, her eyes filled with a profound understanding. "Your heart." On their final evening, as they sat around a crackling fire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows under the starlit sky, Jennifer finally voiced the question that had been simmering beneath the surface of their extraordinary visit. "Aren't you ever afraid having a wild predator in your home?" Elaine considered this, her gaze soft, as she watched Orion delicately extract a perfectly golden marshmallow from a skewer he had somehow learned to hold between his paws, offering it to an eagerly waiting Max. "I'm not afraid of Orion," she said finally, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "But sometimes I am afraid for him." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, accepting her own marshmallow from the Bobcat's careful delivery. "The world doesn't always understand creatures that don't fit into neat categories." Elaine explained, her voice softening with a touch of sadness. "Orion is neither truly wild nor completely tame. He's something in between. Something special. My greatest fear is that someday someone might decide he doesn't belong here with us." "But he's family," Max protested unconsciously, leaning against Orion's warm flank. "Yes," Elaine agreed, her eyes filled with affection, as Cooper hobbled over to join them, settling with a contented groan beside Orion. But not everyone would see it that way. 6 long months after Jennifer and the twins returned to the familiar rhythms of city life in Chicago, Elaine's deepest fear materialized. An anonymous complaint laced with suspicion and misunderstanding triggered a surprise inspection by wildlife authorities, their concern centered on the perceived danger of a wild predator allegedly being kept as a pet. 2 stern-faced wildlife officers arrived unannounced on a blustery March morning. Elaine recognized one of them, Mike Brennan, a by-the-book official, whose rigid adherence to regulations had never quite aligned with her compassionate exceptions for creatures like Orion. "We've received reports," Mike began without preamble, his voice clipped and official, "that you're allowing the Bobcat to interact with children. That's a direct violation of your permit conditions." "Those children were my niece and nephew," Elaine replied evenly, her voice calm, despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "And Orion has never shown the slightest aggression toward any human. Regulations don't make exceptions for family members." The second officer, a younger woman named Torres, stated flatly, her gaze unwavering. "We'll need to reassess the animal's status today." Reassess, a bureaucratic euphemism that often preceded the heartbreaking relocation to a sterile wildlife facility, or worse, the chilling prospect of euthanasia for animals deemed too habituated to human contact hung heavy in the air. Inside the cabin, Cooper, with his uncanny sensitivity to the emotional currents of the household, sensed the palpable tension immediately. A low, anxious whine emanated from his bed. Orion, with his characteristic aversion to unfamiliar presences, had vanished a small mercy in Elaine's already fraught state. The officers conducted a meticulous, disappointingly thorough inspection of Elaine's facilities, meticulously noting every minor infraction. Torres's camera clicked relentlessly, documenting the custom-built shelves and ramps that catered to Orion's unique agility, the specialized feeding station, the discreet cat door, leading to a secure outdoor enclosure. "Where's the Bobcat now?" Mike finally asked, his gaze sharp and unwavering, flipping through his citation book with an ominously deliberate motion. "Probably hiding." Elaine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "He's sensitive to strangers, especially those in uniforms." As if summoned by Elaine's words, a series of distressed whimpers echoed from Cooper's bed. The old dog was struggling to rise, his back legs splaying uselessly beneath him. In recent weeks, his arthritis had cruelly intensified, and this morning seemed particularly brutal. "Cooper, stay down, boy." Elaine called out, her heart aching as she moved toward him. "I'll bring your medicine." But before she could reach the designated cabinet, a shadow moved with silent grace. Orion materialized from his hidden sanctuary, his amber eyes fixed intently on the unfolding scene. With all eyes upon him, the magnificent Bobcat padded directly to the medicine cabinet, opened it with the now familiar hook of his claws, and selected Cooper's pain medication container. The officers watched in stunned, absolute silence as Orion carried the container in his mouth to Elaine, gently placed it in her outstretched hand, and then returned to Cooper, nudging the old dog back into a more comfortable position with a tenderness that belied his wild nature. Did that just happen?" Torres whispered, her official demeanor momentarily shattered, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated astonishment. Elaine, her hands trembling slightly, administered Cooper's medication, then turned to face the officers, her voice filled with a quiet plea. This is what I've been trying to explain in my reports. Orion isn't just a bobcat I rescued. He's remarkable." "Remarkable is an understatement." Mike finished unexpectedly, his stern expression softening as he watched Orion carefully grooming Cooper's face with gentle licks. "In 30 years of wildlife management, I've never witnessed anything remotely like it." What followed was an impromptu, breathtaking demonstration of Orion's extraordinary abilities, not performed as trained tricks for the promise of treats, but as natural, spontaneous expressions of his profound intelligence, and more importantly, his deeply ingrained connection to his unlikely family. He subtly adjusted the thermostat when Cooper let out a soft shiver. He retrieved his own water bowl and nudged it gently toward the old dog when Cooper appeared thirsty. He even dragged his favorite soft blanket across the floor and carefully draped it over Cooper's back. By the time the officers prepared to depart 2 hours later, their citation books remained untouched, their initial skepticism replaced by a palpable sense of wonder. "Now we'll need to create a special designation." Torres murmured, her earlier bureaucratic rigidity dissolving into genuine awe. "This case, it doesn't fit any existing categories." "No," Mike agreed, his gaze lingering on Orion, who had settled protectively beside Cooper, one paw resting gently on the old dog's shoulder. "He certainly doesn't." A year later, Jennifer returned with the twins for another visit, stepping into a cabin transformed. A small, gleaming brass plaque beside the door now proudly identified it as the Orion Study Center for Interspecies Cognition, an official research facility generously sponsored by the state university where Frank Elaine's wise neighbor had once imparted his vast knowledge. Cooper had passed peacefully the previous winter, his gentle spirit now a cherished memory. but his legacy lived on in the hundreds of photographs adorning the walls, the majority capturing the unlikely heartwarming friendship between the old dog and the extraordinary Bobcat. A bond that had touched countless hearts after Mike and Torres had shared their astonishing experience. Now, Orion gracefully navigated his days, dividing his time between being Elaine's beloved companion, a constant source of joy and wonder, and serving as the gentle subject of Frank's respectful studies on animal intelligence. Each new groundbreaking discovery about his cognitive abilities helped to shape more compassionate wildlife policies, fostering a deeper understanding of the complex inner lives of creatures once dismissed as operating purely on instinct. As the children, their laughter echoing through the cabin, rushed to greet their favorite Bobcat, now comfortably sprawled in a sun-drenched patch on the living room floor, Jennifer noticed something new. A framed letter hung prominently near the entrance, radiating an air of official significance. It was a formal document from the Wildlife Resources Commission, establishing a first-of-its-kind designation, Interspecies Ambassador. Below the formal language and numerous official signatures, someone had added a heartfelt handwritten note. For Orion, who reminds us that intelligence wears many forms, compassion knows no species, and family is found in the most unexpected places. Elaine joined her, her eyes sparkling with warmth as she followed Jennifer's gaze to the letter. Not bad for a Bobcat with an IQ of 200, huh? I'd say he's off the charts. Jennifer replied, her voice thick with emotion, as she watched Orion patiently allow the children to show him their latest artwork, his intelligent amber eyes bright with what anyone witnessing would swear was genuine understanding and love. In the quiet cabin nestled at the edge of the Ozark Mountains, the lines between wild and domestic continued to blur, challenging long-held preconceptions and opening hearts to the boundless possibilities of connection. And at the very heart of it all was Orion, neither fully wild nor truly tame, but perfectly extraordinarily himself.